Welcome to the August 2017 BJS British Journal of Surgery Editor Podcast. I'm Robert Hinchliffe. As usual, something for all surgeons in the August issue, including another editor's paper of the month, but more of that later. Do you ever struggle to keep up to date with surgical literature? Since 1998, BJS has scanned the top 50 medical journals for randomized trials relevant to surgical practice and placed them with a brief summary of their findings in our scientific surgery repository. You could be forgiven for missing it, but it is at the back of every BJS issue and on the BJS website. This really is a fantastic resource for busy surgeons, whether as trainees, especially those approaching exams, or well-established consultants. For example, were you aware that there were randomized trials on both cellulitis and anemia in JAMA this month, on the medical management of PAD and breast cancer in the New England Journal, and on dexamethasone for postoperative nausea and vomiting in the BMJ? As surgeons, we all consent patients for surgery. Informed consent and cases that have informed the way we consent, including the Bolam case, are familiar to most of us. But times are changing, and the way many of us have consented patients is no longer acceptable. In his leader, Robert Wheeler from the Department of Clinical Law in Southampton explains the evolution of consent, the notion of shared decision-making and landmark cases, most notably the Montgomery ruling, that have catalysed that change. The Clavian-Dindo classification system for postoperative complications has become enshrined within the reporting of surgical studies. In this issue of BJS, Professor Clavian reviews the contribution of his classification system to improving the outcomes of surgery around the globe. He also describes the development of his latest system, the Comprehensive Complication Index. The Comprehensive Complication Index integrates all recorded complications into a single formula, giving a scale ranging from 0, or no complication, to 100, or death, with an online calculator. Professor Clavian believes this tool will become part of everyday clinical practice and allow quality improvement across surgical specialties. It's not easy to argue against his view. The outcomes of gastric cancer are generally poor, and therefore selection of patients for therapies that might impair the quality of their remaining life without improving survival are very important. In this issue, 2 papers report systems that may improve decision-making in cohorts of gastric cancer patients. These include scoring systems that have been developed to help with selection for chemotherapy, and others that have been validated to help predict recurrence and survival after radical gastrectomy. As surgeons, to adopt new classification systems for postoperative complications and better ways of consenting patients for surgery, so must we embrace new technologies and new methodologies. Imaging was once thought to be the remit only of radiologists and physicists, but increasingly surgeons have embraced this technology and led the way in evolving it for the benefit of our surgical patients. In this issue, there are excellent studies on the utility of both MRI and PET-CT for different indications in breast cancer. The former for monitoring neoadjuvant chemotherapy and the latter in tailored auxiliary management. There is an additional paper on the utility of MRI in identifying peritoneal metastases. Many studies examining outcomes of surgical patients, especially those with cancer, use standard survival analyses. However, there is increasing awareness that these simple analyses are subject to major confounding. New statistical methodology in the form of competing risk analysis exposes some of our previously held views. In this issue on microsatellite instability in colorectal cancer. This is an analytical approach which surgeons should become familiar with. Timing of randomized trials is a constant bone of contention. Do them too early and the technique or technology hasn't settled, and do it too late and equipoise is lost. But what happens when a new kid comes on the block in the midst of an ongoing randomized trial? Well, this is just what happened in obesity surgery during a randomized trial of bypass and gastric bands. The authors demonstrated that it was possible to amend these big randomized trials to take account of emerging technologies and technology and changing surgical practice, in this case laparoscopic sleeve gastrectomy. And that leads nicely to the editor's paper of the month. I'm pleased to say that the quality of randomized trials in surgery continues to blossom, and the Dutch have once again led the way. A group from Maastricht in the editor's paper of the month performed a randomized clinical trial of percutaneous tibial nerve stimulation versus sham electrical stimulation in patients with fecal incontinence. These sorts of trials were once thought unethical, but groups like this from Maastricht and others such as the musculoskeletal group from Oxford have led by example, and this is a terrific piece of work. The question is whether you can guess the outcome, of course. Well, that's it from me for the August issue. All it remains for me to do is to thank you for listening, and I hope you enjoy reading and discussing this issue. For those of you listening in the Northern Hemisphere, I hope you enjoy your summer holidays.